Hey guys, welcome back to Steel City Sports. So today I'm going to be taking my first look at the 2025 NFL Draft here on the channel. I'm only going to do the top 10 picks for today's video. As we get closer to the draft, I'm going to do like an entire first round mock draft because we're still months out. We still haven't seen how the playoffs are going to go, so we don't know like how the end of the first round is going to look. So I'm going to wait on that for, later down the road. For today, we're just talking about the top 10 picks with the draft order, how it is. It's already set. Of course, trades could happen. It seems like every year there is a trade that goes down within the top 10 picks, but I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to use the draft order that we have right now as of January 17th, 2025. So with the first overall pick currently held by the Tennessee Titans, the big debate online right now is it going to be Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders? And for a long, long time, I was in the camp of Shedeur is going to be the first overall pick in this class. When you're looking at, the comparison between Shedeur and Cam Ward, I think it really comes down to what type of prospect do you want. I think Shedeur is the safer bet. I think he has more NFL-ready tools right now. I think he's a more accurate thrower of the football right now. So if you want like a higher floor in your quarterback, you want more of like a sure thing, I do think that is Shedeur. He's very accurate. Can play well as an improviser, although he's not like this like great dual threat quarterback. I feel like a lot of people who haven't watched Colorado or watched the Shedeur film just kind of assume he's like this great athlete like his dad. That's not really how he played at Colorado. He played more of like the stay in the pocket, more traditional. And yeah, he did improvise. He did get out of the pocket, but I think of him more so as like a kind of a throwback, stand in the pocket, can move, but not really the strong part of his game. Whereas with Cam Ward, has explosive upside. The problem is when you just look at accuracy, Shedeur was a far more accurate quarterback, and I think accuracy, obviously, I don't think it's a controversial thing to say accuracy is the most important attribute with a quarterback. So, like I said, this really comes down to what the Titans want in their potential building block going forward. Do you want the more sure thing guy, has a higher floor, but I think a lower ceiling? Or do you want the higher upside guy in Cam Ward, who I think could legitimately, if he does reach his full potential, could be a superstar in the NFL? Whereas with Shedeur, at his absolute max, I don't really see Shedeur as a superstar. I think he could be a really high-end starter, somewhere in that like 12th to 8th best quarterback range at his best, whereas Cam Ward, I think, has superstar upside. So that is why I'm going to go with Cam Ward as the first overall pick. This is really the first time, obviously I haven't posted any mock drafts on this channel, but I do like to, every couple of days, I'll go on that PFF, draft simulator, and I'll fill it out. And for the longest time, I was day in, day out, week after week, putting Shedeur as the number one overall pick. But now that I'm seeing this unfold more, now that I've looked more into these prospects, I think the upside of Cam Ward is just too much to pass on. And I just think that he's a really exciting player. There's a lot to like. I think he's a better athlete than the Shedeur. And although he's not as accurate as Shedeur, I do think he has a bigger arm. I think his deep ball ability is better than Shedeur, maybe even right now. So I'm going to go with the Titans taking Cam Ward, as obviously Will Levis was a catastrophic disaster this year. I don't know if I'd say it had high hopes for Will Levis because I was just kind of unsure about him. I thought he showed some flashes of potential, and I think Tennessee actually did a good job this offseason of putting a lot of weapons around him. They brought in Calvin Ridley to go with D-Hop, who was pretty good in 2023. They got him two, good starting running backs, Pollard and Tajay Spears. They used the 6th overall pick on J.C. Latham to, bolster the O-line. They brought in an offensive passing game-oriented head coach in Brian Callahan. So I feel like the Titans invested a lot in their offense to, maximize the potential of Will Levis, and he really just didn't work out. He's just not very good. He's not an NFL starting level quarterback. He's just too boneheaded of a player, makes too many reckless decisions. So they're in dire need of a quarterback going forward, so I do think Cam Ward is their building block going forward. And like I just said about Will Levis, there's a lot in Tennessee. I think there's a lot of positives there. Like I said, their coach is on the right side of the ball. and he's pass game oriented, obviously coming from the Bengals. They've got Calvin Ridley, who I think continues to be one of the most underrated receivers in the league. The guy puts up numbers no matter who his quarterback is. You still got 2 good running backs there. You got that O-line. They can maybe even bring in another weapon or draft one. So there's at least some stuff here. There are some building blocks here in Tennessee that I think, put Cam Ward in at least a somewhat good position to succeed. It's not like I have him going to like the Raiders, like where the Raiders, there's like really outside of Brock Bowers, there's really no positives about that. Whereas Tennessee, there's a couple things I like about them to, develop a young QB. So that brings us to the 2nd overall pick, which is currently held by the Cleveland Browns. So I would have them taking Shedeur right here because it's obvious that they need a quarterback. They have arguably the worst quarterback situation in the entire league right now with Deshaun. We've talked about him ad nauseum, so I don't really want to talk too much about Deshaun, but we know the contract bullshit. We know that like a couple days ago just fucking ruptured his Achilles yet again. So I would be kind of surprised if Deshaun Watson ever played another game in a Cleveland Browns uniform. That's honestly probably a good thing because even when he played, he sucked. He was really bad. He was a bottom 10 to 5 starter in the league, even when he played. So moving on from Deshaun, like if you're Cleveland, I think you are in dire straits of a QB because if you don't draft one, then what's the plan next year? Like just bring Jameis back and win 5 games again with a lot of good players. That's the thing that I think a lot of people don't talk about enough about this Cleveland Browns team is they're a couple years removed from that playoff team that made it with Baker back in 2020. They beat my Steelers in the first round where they had a ton of talent on that team. There's still a lot of those players on this Cleveland Browns football team. Their O-line might not be as dominant as it was back then, but it's still a really good, easily top 10 to maybe top 5 O-line in the league right now. You have Jerry Jeudy, fresh off a Pro Bowl season. You have Nick Chubb, who looked all right, back off injury. I don't know how fair it is to rely on Nick Chubb at this point in time, but he had a couple spots here and there. You have a really talented young offensive coach in Kevin Stefanski, who's already won Coach of the Year 2 times with the Cleveland Browns. And you have a pretty capable defense as well. So like I said when I first brought up the Browns, I said I would have them taking Shedeur here. However, we just got the notification, I think it was a day or 2 ago, that Dion said he's not going to be a Brown. I will block any part of that. Shedeur will not play for Cleveland. Now, you can argue whether that's fair or not. Seeing it from Dion's perspective, I don't really disagree with him. Just seeing how poorly the Browns managed the whole Deshaun thing with how bad they treated Baker, with just how much they've fucked up the quarterback position in the history of their franchise. They've had however many starters since they came back from 99. There's obviously that, famous meme of that guy with the jersey on of, I think it was Tim Couch. And then it's like every single starting quarterback they've had since then. And it's like, the list goes off the screen because it's just like they have never been able to figure out that position since 99, since they came back. They have never, ever once. Oh, they did with Baker, and they got rid of him. And they brought in Deshaun, and it's been a fucking disaster. It's been an absolute cataclysmic disaster. So I can kind of see both sides of this argument here. It's like from one standpoint, it's like the Browns have some stuff to work with. Like we said, they have a Pro Bowl receiver. They have a good O-line. They have a good offensive-minded coach. They have a good defense. Like there's good stuff here with Cleveland. But given their track record, I can see why Dion does not trust Cleveland. Now, this kind of puts the Browns in an awkward situation because then they'd probably go with Travis Hunter, who I think is the best available player. But would Dion block that as well? Because it's clear like Dion represents Travis Hunter just like he represents Shedeur. So if he's not going to let Shedeur go to Cleveland, would he let Travis Hunter go to Cleveland? That's a big question mark as well. So then it would be like, okay, who do the Browns take then? Maybe Abdul Carter would make a lot of sense with Garrett starting to get closer to 30. And I do think Abdul Carter is the best defensive player in this class. But we don't know. We don't know if Dion would block a Travis Hunter draft selection here. So that's why I do have 2nd overall the Cleveland Browns drafting Travis Hunter, wide receiver / corner, the reigning Heisman this year. If they're not going to get Shedeur, if he's completely blocked here, then I just think they go with the best player available, and that is Travis Hunter, who's just an absolute freak athlete, one of the most unique players I've ever seen across any sport to just play, every down at Colorado. pretty much, and just dominate at both positions, winning. I personally, I think of Travis Hunter as a corner. That's what he came out of high school, as a 5-star recruit corner. When he went to Jackson State to play for Deion, it was as a corner. I think that's why he picked Jackson State and Deion, because who's the greatest corner of all time? Deion. So I think Travis Hunter was really allured by that as a corner prospect. So I think of him more as a corner. Who the fuck knows what he's going to play in the NFL? I think if you say you know one way or another, you don't know, because Deion has told teams, if you're not going to let him play both sides of the ball, don't even bother drafting him. Don't even talk to him. So I don't know what the fuck is going to happen with Travis Hunter. I honestly think it's kind of a good problem to have. It's like, if your biggest red flag against Travis Hunter is we don't know what side of the ball he's going to play, that's kind of I think a good problem, because he's just so freakishly good at both sides of the ball. So I think that it's a good problem to have on your hands. So with them not being able to land Cam Ward or Shedeur, if Deion and Shedeur are really going to enforce this "we're not going to Cleveland" thing, then yeah, I have them going with Travis Hunter. But you could even argue that if Deion's not going to let Shedeur go there, then he's not going to let Travis Hunter go there. So I just don't fucking know. That's why this is a very informal early on discussion about this draft, because we're still months out. There's still a lot of stuff we haven't found out about the upcoming draft. But for now, I have them taking Travis Hunter. So with the 3rd overall pick, the New York Giants catch a break here, and they get their quarterback going forward in Shedeur Sanders. I think it would be really interesting, because Brian Daboll is the most interesting part of this, because if things go bad quickly with Shedeur, or if they have like a really disappointing season, which, is probably likely just because the Giants aren't very good, and I don't think Shedeur year 1 is going to be able to just save them. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he will, but odds are against it. So let's just say they draft Shedeur 3rd overall, and they go like 4-13 or whatever, and they have another disappointing year. They fire Daboll. That's going to be like, okay, Deion is going to the Giants. Like, everyone's going to be talking about that. So I don't know if that's necessarily like the most healthy environment you want to set up for a football team, because that story is going to go wherever Shedeur goes, whether he does end up a Cleveland Brown, whether he ends up a New York Giant, wherever the fuck Shedeur goes. The conversation is always going to be, is his dad going to become the head coach there? That's just kind of how it is. So let's just take the Deion part out of this and just look at him going there. It would be really interesting, because Brian Daboll, I still give him a ton of credit for how he helped develop Josh Allen with the Bills. I still think a really impressive accomplishment of Brian Daboll's is that 2022 season where the Giants made the playoffs out of nowhere. He won Coach of the Year, and he got Daniel Jones a $40+ million annual contract, which I think might honestly be one of the greatest achievements as a head coach, to say, I schemed up a guy so bad at like Daniel Jones, a guy who sucks, who's now a 3rd stringer on the Vikings. I got that guy a $40 million contract because I made him look that good when he, that year. So I still think there's something there with Brian Daboll. I do think it was a good decision to bring him back, because it's like, what do you want the guy to do this year when you're rolling out there with Daniel Jones and Drew Lock and Danny DeVito? Like, no shit, Brian Daboll didn't win a ton of games. So it's like, I think it's actually a good thing to bring Daboll back, and especially if you can land him one of these QB prospects and just let him develop it. Like, he has a really good track record of developing these young quarterbacks like Josh Allen. So I like the fit. I like the fit with the Giants. He'd have an immediate target connection with Malik Neighbors. I think that'd be a really fascinating, explosive duo, Shedeur to Malik Neighbors. It'd be a lot of fun to watch. I think it's pretty clear Shedeur wants to be a New York Giant, because if you follow him on social media, he's been posting pictures of him wearing like Giants merchandise and like hanging out in New York with Malik Neighbors. So I think it's just kind of inevitable, especially, like I said, I hate to keep saying this, but if they're going to enforce that he's not going to Cleveland, then I think it's just an inevitability that he will be a New York Giant, and it'll be a lot of fun to see Shedeur, the big name, the big personality, in a massive market like New York City. So that's what I have going 3rd overall. Now we get to number 4, the New England Patriots. I think you can go one of 2 players here. You can either go Tetaroa McMillan or Abdul Carter. I think both make sense, but just looking at positional value, I have them drafting Abdul Carter here. Now, for a long time, I had them taking, depending on where they were in the draft board, back when they had the number 1 overall pick a couple weeks ago, I'd always give them Travis Hunter. When they were at like 7 or 8, I'd give them Tetaroa McMillan. But now that they're like in the middle of that at 4, I think this is honestly just a couple spots too high to take a receiver, because Abdul Carter, I think, has generational upside. There's a reason why he gets compared to Micah Parsons. It's weird, It's honestly kind of weird how eerie they are in terms of like their similarities between Micah and Abdul Carter. They went to Penn State, they wore the same number there, and they play the exact same way. So if you can get a Micah Parsons 2.0 here, I think this is especially with New England, who has really like no talent, really on either side of the ball, but I've said this how many times on the channel, most important position is quarterback. They've got their quarterback. Drake May looks like he's going to be a really good player. What's the second most important position in the league? The guy who can get to the other team's quarterback, pass rush. So Abdul Carter, if you have your two, building blocks going forward between Drake May and Abdul Carter, that's a really bright future, especially with them bringing in Mike Vrabel to be their new head coach, which I thought was an incredible hire. He should have been the hire last year instead of Gerard Mayo. So I think, like I said, you can certainly make the argument for Tetaroa McMillan because they need receiver, but I do think they're going to be aggressive with that in free agency or making a trade maybe. I've seen them heavily linked to T. Higgins, which I think would make a ton of sense because they're not paying anybody, so they can afford to crack a big bag to T. Higgins. So that would be like their ideal offseason if they're able to land T. Higgins to give Drake May a weapon and getting Abdul Carter a potential generational level pass rusher. That's like a dream offseason for the Patriots. And I think they've already checked their first box of a dream offseason. That's firing Gerard Mayo because that guy should have never been a coach. Now we move on to the 5th overall pick, which is held by the Jacksonville Jaguars. I have them taking Will Johnson, the stud corner from Michigan. So obviously with us not knowing which side of the ball Hunter's going to play, that makes me say I think Will Johnson's the best pure corner in this class. The Jaguars' defense as a whole really bad this past year. Their pass defense totally mediocre, just a unit. The Jags are another team that you could really make an argument for really any position. They're just a really bad overall roster. They have holes all over this team. So you could go receiver, O-line, D-line, corner. I wouldn't really be mad at any of them, but I just think Will Johnson is the best player available at this point in the draft. He's the best pure corner. They have really no playmakers in their secondary. And they're just tied to Trevor Lawrence. So it's like, obviously they're not going to be on the hunt for a quarterback. They're not even in range to get one of them. So Will Johnson, I think, makes a ton of sense to Jacksonville. Has super high upside there. Number 6, we have the Raiders. I think the Raiders could go in a number of directions here. I even made one mock draft where I had them taking Jalen Milroe 6th overall. And my rationale behind that was there's always a team or two every year that like super overdraft a quarterback just because they're so desperate to land their QB. We saw it happen last year. Michael Penix and Bo Nix were both viewed as second-round players, yet they both went in the top 12 of last year's draft, and no one had that on their big board. No one saw that coming. So I do think there's, maybe a slim chance that they would do something like that. I think a lot of people would give them shit for it, but I'm not predicting that to happen just because I don't think Jalen Milroe is a first-round pick, so to take him at 6 I think would be kind of fucking crazy. So you could go, I think, one of two ways here. I think they're just so desperate for offensive production. Outside of Brock Bowers, they need another playmaker there. And I guess there's a strong possibility that they just punt another year on the quarterback position. Maybe they could go out there and get a bridge guy like a Justin Fields, or, even if the Vikings want to get rid of Sam Darnold, maybe you could somehow get him. But I just think they're going to take another offensive weapon here. You could go Tetaroa McMillan or Ashton Jeanty. I do have them drafting Ashton Jeanty 6th overall. I think that he is good enough to carry an NFL offense. I think he's one of the greatest running back prospects we've ever seen, probably since Saquon. And yeah, his explosiveness, look at what he did at Boise, is generational stuff. So I think he can be an engine of an offense really early in his career, and that's something the Raiders desperately need with their lack of a quarterback, is they need a guy that they can time after time, down after down, rely on. I think GNT could be that very early in his career, so I have the Raiders taking him. Number 7, we have the New York Jets. They're an absolute fucking tire fire right now. So who the fuck knows what the Jets are going to do? Maybe they'll take Jalen Milroe. I don't know. I mean, we don't know if if I had to bet on it, I'd say Aaron will not be a Jet next year. Probably Devontae won't be either. They don't have a head coach or GM named right now. So who the fuck knows with the Jets? Like, who honestly knows? They're such a fucking train wreck right now. So they could go any position. I wouldn't be shocked, but I have them going with Will Campbell from LSU, the offensive tackle, just because their O-line. I had people making arguments to me that they were kind of underrated, and people were blaming Aaron more so on their O-line looking bad because he was holding the ball too long, but I still think it's just a very lackluster, unproductive unit, and I think Will Campbell being the best O-lineman prospect in this class, I just went with him. I think he makes a lot of sense to the Jets, and with there being so much uncertainty, I just think, I just picked the player. I think it makes sense here because even if you're going to go in another direction at quarterback, which I said is probably likely, you want to build up that O-line no matter what. Number 8 is the Carolina Panthers, so this is where we finally find a home for Teteroa McMillan. I have him being drafted 8th by Carolina, and really the big rationale behind this is it's clear Bryce Young earned another year as the starter in Carolina. So I think if you're Carolina management, you want to do the most you can to put around Bryce Young to succeed and to make it, a prove-it year for Bryce Young. Put as much you possibly can around him to succeed. And I think going out there and getting him a potential superstar receiver would make a lot of sense. If you want to have Bryce Young succeed as your franchise QB, just get him more help. That's all you can do. I think they actually made a pretty good hire with Dave Canales down the stretch. He kind of figured out Bryce Young. Their offense looked decent. I think they were a point away from beating the Chiefs. Like, we have to see, if that was a little late season fluke or if maybe there is something with Bryce Young. If you want to find out, put as much as you can around him. So I have them taking the best receiver prospect, from the experts. Personally, I do think Luther Burden has higher upside, but the experts like Teteroa McMillan more. So I'm going to say that Carolina takes him here at 8. Number 9, we have the Saints. I have them drafting Mason Graham, the defensive tackle from Michigan. I think he's going to be a fucking monster. I think he's going to be a decade-plus star in the NFL. Just has basically every NFL intangible you'd want: strength, power, speed at that position. I think he's a no-brainer. And for the Saints, their D-line's getting older, particularly Cam Jordan's been the rock of that D-line for a decade plus now. He's probably on the way out of his career, so you just replace Cam Jordan there with really none of the big needs of this team. I don't think there's any great value at those positions. Obviously QB, they desperately need that. So maybe they are going to be the team to reach on Jalen Milroe. Who knows? They also kind of want a receiver as well. I honestly wouldn't be that surprised if they took Luther Burden here. That could make a lot of sense because who even knows if Chris Olave is going to be back after that injury he suffered. But, similar to what I said about Jacksonville, this is just a team with a lot of holes on it. So I just kind of have them going with best available player here in Mason Graham. So that brings us to the 10th overall pick, the last one we're going to be talking about for today. That is currently held by the Chicago Bears. So I don't care which one they take. They have to take an O-lineman here. Whether you want to go Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas or Josh Simmons from Ohio State, I don't give a fuck. Whatever O-lineman is on the top of their board, take them. Because that is by far and away the biggest issue of this Bears team from a roster perspective. Obviously, I think the biggest problem with the Bears is the management. They're fucking idiots. Kevin Warren, the president, kind of a bonehead. Not really well liked around the league. The owners, the McCaskies, they don't really care about football. They just see it as a business. So the people running the Bears, I don't think are very sharp. I don't think they're very competent. Ryan Poles, I think you could go, either way on him if he's good or bad. But that's a video for a different day talking about the structure of the Bears. We're talking about the draft here. So like I said, whoever they view as the best O-lineman still left on the board here, I'm going to go with Kelvin Banks Jr. I think he has extremely high upside. I think he can be a star at the tackle position. He's the best player on that Texas team. that made it so far, that made it to the Final Four this year, and I think he can be a foundational building block of an offense going forward, and that's something the Bears desperately need. Now, similar to what I said about the Jets with like Aaron holding the ball too long, maybe the Bears O-line looked worse because of Caleb holding onto the ball too long, but it's clear, even if you want to make that argument, I still think their O-line is by far their biggest problem. And, a lot of people blasted Ryan Poles for taking Rome Odunze 9th overall last year whenever he could have taken Talise Fuunga or one of the O-linemen. When they, obviously Rome Odunze, a really good player. I think he's going to have a really long career in the NFL, but their biggest need was O-line, and they passed on that with that pick to take Rome. They can't do it back-to-back years. They have to draft an O-lineman, whoever that is. Like I said, I think it's going to be Kelvin Banks Jr., So that has been it for my initial look at the 2025 NFL Draft. Like I said earlier in the video, definitely let me know down in the comments, where do you think some of these players are going, all that stuff. So if you made it this far in the video, really appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe.